Coming up this week on the Markcast. Well, here we go. After months and months of waiting, angry tweets, frustrations, everything you could imagine, the XFL 2023 schedule is finally here. Wouldn't you know it? So check your calendars, clear your agendas, get your to-do lists ready. It is time to watch some XFL football.
Okay, let's see my to-do list.
And if that wasn't enough, wouldn't you believe it? The XFL Vegas Vipers have an honest-to-goodness stadium to play at. Thank gosh. Playing at Cashman Field, we have all the latest last-minute decisions. This was a last-minute deal. What is happening with the Vegas Vipers? Great guest list today, the Professor Andrew Murray. When we need a breakdown, we bring in the Professor Andrew Murray. Full XFL 2023 schedule analysis. What is happening? TV networks, lineups. The Sea Dragons are playing on Thursdays. They're playing on Easter Sunday. What is going on?
I think there's a lot to talk about here as far as a lot of the time slots. I know you and Max were going on about it quite a bit in the live stream, and I have some thoughts on it too. But I would say overall, I'm not too displeased by it. And I think based on the days and the consistency of the days of which they're aired on, which we'll get into later, but I'm pretty happy about it. I'm just happy I can finally buy my plane tickets and go to these games.
And then Pat Rifino, covering the XFL Battlehawks, gives his thoughts on the XFL 2023 schedule. And we're also previewing XFL training camps. Players are reporting this week. Practices start next week.
There are some guys that clearly have a lot of ties to him and Bowler. Dave Bowler, DPP, when they were with the AAF together. There are some guys that he went straight to the NFL like AJ McCarron, which I believe Mike Mitchell has made it very clear that McCarron was a Beck guy. I'm always of note that I want known commodities when I'm doing these alt leagues. I think AJ McCarron was a perfect pick because we know who he is.
Hey guys, welcome to the Markcast. Reed here. Crazy day. I have been standing in front of this computer since the wee hours this morning. Max joined me, researcher, producer, listener Max. We did a full XFL 2023 live reactions right when we had a little tip off, right when the schedule got dropped. We were ready to go. If you missed that episode, it is available on our YouTube channel, and you can go to the audio feed as well, themarkcast.com/watch or listen. Really fun. Max and I about an hour and a half breaking down, just frantically kind of going through everything that came out this morning. Lots of fun. A little more focused episode today now for your regularly scheduled Friday programming. Not going to ramble too much here. Andrew Murray joining us, fresh off of work, coming in. Missed all the excitement today. I'm really kind of curious to see what Andrew's thoughts are about all this. You know, he hasn't lived through this all day like we all have. Thoughts on all the networks and the matchups, everything with the XFL schedule, you know, Thursday games and Monday games and March Madness. All of that stuff, lots of exciting things to talk about. We're finally here with the schedule. Really excited to get Andrew Murray's thoughts on that. Pat Rifino. Pat was on during the XFL draft. Pat covers the Battlehawks for XFL News Hub. Pat's coming on. We were originally just going to do a Battlehawks training camp preview. I have a bunch of writers coming up, kind of breaking down all the different rosters here following the supplemental draft. Pat's the first one of that. We have many more coming here in the next few weeks. And then obviously getting Pat's thoughts as well on the Battlehawks and not playing a home game until week 4. Lots of things to talk about with Pat today. Going to keep this short. Make sure you like and subscribe. Officially now, the non-homeless Vegas Vipers. Also talking about that today with Andrew Murray. Brian Scott, one of the quarterbacks that's going to be competing. I don't know if he would like to, competing. I don't know if Brian thinks he's competing, but one of the first quarterbacks here for the XFL Vegas Vipers. Brian signed this ball back when he played in the Spring League. We are giving this away for our 2,500 subscriber giveaway. Almost there, adding subscribers every day with all of the XFL news coming about. Please make sure, like I said, like and subscribe. Get your chance to win this. I also have a bunch of Spring League jerseys, other merchandise and stuff. We're all going to give away. I think about 100 or so, really getting close to the 2,500 subscriber mark. So, please get in on that. Get a chance to win. And I just got so much stuff in this office, if you can't tell. So, like and subscribe. Get some of these goodies off my hands. Really appreciate that. I will toss to the interviews. Check back in at the end of the show. Thanks as always for listening. And before I go, just a special, we acknowledged it today in the live stream. Lots of still concerns, thoughts, and prayers for Damar Hamlin and his family, teammates, friends, everybody going on with that, monitoring that very closely. I know all of the XFL writers that I associate with, we've been monitoring that since Monday night. Thoughts and prayers with everybody involved in that situation. Really just horrific all the way around. Hopefully that all resolves itself here. It seems like things are at least potentially trending in the right direction. I know we're not really out of the woodwork yet, but thoughts and prayers for Damar Hamlin and his family. Thank you guys all so much. I know it's like XFL schedule talk, lots more serious stuff going on, but this is, it's what you come here for, a little bit of hopefully a levity, break of kind of seriousness and all of that here with us, analyzing the XFL schedule. So thanks as always. Take care. Well, I'm going to be full screen here for just a minute, show off my jersey, just coming off Kraken 5-2 win over the Toronto Maple Leafs tonight. Wardrobe change. I've recorded a bunch of stuff tonight. Wardrobe change. We have Andrew Murray here, the professor. I hope you don't feel like I'm calling on you too much. I do appreciate your expertise coming on so often right now.
Like I said, I ride the bench every week. You did name drop me a lot this morning, though. I watched the stream, and you guys were definitely on about it quite a bit. So I appreciate it. I'm thank you for promoting the segment so much, really.
No, I appreciate it. So Andrew's here now. So yeah, if you missed it, Max, kind of producer, researcher, Max and I, we went live this morning, 7 Pacific. Andy had to work. A lot of people have to work. And so we have a little bit more focus because it's always chaotic. The live streams are always like, okay, what's going on? And we're getting the press releases and people are posting stuff. So now we have everything ready to go. I can pop this up and we'll go through a bunch of takeaways. We have notes. Andy has a bunch. Max has a bunch, just kind of general takeaways from the schedule. And then Pat Rifino's coming on in the next segment. And Pat and I also do kind of his thoughts because Pat covers the Battlehawks more kind of specifically. So we'll get his thoughts on that. Andy, first off, your general thoughts, reaction today.
I'm not surprised that there wasn't really a time slot officially announced beforehand, as far as I knew. But I think we all kind of speculated that it was going to drop at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Like that was kind of the thought going in. And sure enough, there it was in all its glory and kind of just popped out. There was some teasing last night, obviously, by a lot of the social media accounts, which some of it was pretty creative. I think one of the DPs, I think for the Battlehawks, I believe, dropped also a little bit of a hint that it was going to happen. So that obviously came to fruition. There wasn't any backing out last second. So I think the rollout was fine. Obviously, the illusions were good. I think there's a lot to talk about here as far as a lot of the time slots. I know you and Max were going on about it quite a bit in the live stream, and I have some thoughts on it too. But I would say overall, I'm not too displeased by it. And I think based on the days and the consistency of the days of which they're aired on, which we'll get into later. But I'm pretty happy about it. I'm just happy I could finally buy my plane tickets and go to these games. That's really, I've been on and on. I've banged on the table about that. I've sent you messages several times about that. I've been ready to buy my plane tickets and make this official. So.
Yeah, well, so that's good. So I am very worried. So maybe you can talk me off the ledge as we get through all of this today. Yes, I mentioned at the end of the show I recorded, we'll be at the XFL Kickoff game. If you're coming, whoever's coming, we'll figure out what that looks like. But I'm locked in for that. We're going to Mexico that next week. So it works out really well that we can bounce to Dallas and then down. We're going to get into the Vegas Cashman Field of it all here later because Andy's been on that before. But if anyone kind of curious about last minute, like why did this come? And we thought it was going to be last week. So this is Mick Akers here. He's with the Sports Journal down in Vegas, reporting that the Cashman deal came out finalized last night. So if you're wondering, where it was supposed to be last week, it was supposed to be Monday or Tuesday, like what's going on? For whatever reason, the rumors were Bishop Gorman. If they pulled out, the reasoning behind that. They decided to go with Cashman Field. We'll get obviously thoughts on that. But what do you make of this coming out, finalized last night, Wednesday, as we record this, and now we have the schedule on Thursday? That's pretty wild. I would like the 30 for 30 of what happened there.
I would too. I mean, this has been such a whirlwind. I'm glad it's just done, but for it to be done in this fashion, I mean, obviously there was a lot of backing out. I think there was reports that Gorman Field might have backed out of the deal. Obviously, the jousting with Allegiant Stadium was just not going to happen. That was absolutely not going to happen. I think the impending thought going forward, as we were talking about it and continuing to discuss it, was that it was not going to happen for various reasons, which we've already delved into. Look, I mean, this is a fine enough venue, and I think capacity-wise, it's not too daunting to fill. My question is it going to be filled with a hungry appetite from the Vegas goers? That's really my thing, because if this is a tourist economy that Vegas is, are you going to be able to just attract people to this venue and have them flock to it on a semi-regular basis? Obviously, there being 5 home games. That's really my question here, because I don't know what the fan base is like. I don't know what the attention to it like. I know you were down in Vegas about a year ago, and you said there wasn't really much going on as far as like outreach or like people being in the know of what was going to happen in the coming months. But I just think this is going to be a really interesting experiment to see if people are willing to put up with this sort of venue and if they're going to be able to just go to it. Now, I will say, I personally am going to drive out to Vegas and go to one of these games. I've already decided that it's about a 5-hour drive for me. I'm planning to do it. I've already made that commitment. But again, I'm in the know. I know all this stuff. I don't know what that's going to be like for these people coming in and out of the city. So as far as that is, I don't know. Allegiant Stadium would have been better, obviously, of course, because it's a sexier venue. It's a bigger venue. It's got more bells and whistles to it, and it's more sort of in line with what people expect with Vegas. This is maybe not as glamorous as people were expecting. So that's really the question: are there just people who just want to show up and go to games? That's really the question here.
I'm curious, and I guess we'll just stop down on this, and then because one kind of begets the other here. But the idea that this is slightly removed from the strip, I'll be curious what the demo is. I don't know the answer to that. I'm looking on, and I mean, we've done talking about this before, but just now that we kind of, we're able to look on here, I would say kind of the stratosphere is kind of the far north that Dorothy and I, we've been to Vegas, a dozen times. This is definitely a drivable, destination that you're going to go to here. So I'll just be curious, like how much, Allegiant, you get a little bit more. Hey, we're going to stay there. We're going to, walk over. We're going to go stay at Mandalay Bay, walk over. I mean, we've done that walk. We haven't gone to Raiders games there, but we've seen the store and walked around and all that stuff. So I'll just be curious, like are you getting like a casual audience here, or is this people that like live in town? Just be curious what the demo is. It doesn't bother me. I mean, 8,000, 10,000, whatever, like Globe Life is weird too. And I said that last week on here. Globe Life is or Choctaw Stadium now, weird venue in Dallas. They roll with it. And I always thought, okay, well, that one's grandfathered in. Like, is that why that's okay? But I'm just glad they settled with it, because I was just really tired of the comments every day about like, okay, what's going on here? So.
Well, I'm sure so were they, but obviously, but it just seems to show you that this was really last minute. And this is kind of what a lot of us were worried about was this going to get done before this? I mean, I've assumed it was going to get done by the end of the season. I joked several times. I was like, I don't care if they play in a parking lot. If that's what it's going to take, get them out there. But obviously, less than ideal situation. This has been a far bigger headache than I think the league anticipated. And if this is what they end up with, honestly, it's not the worst. It's not the worst thing they could have. And I think given the circumstances, I think they should be thankful that they even have this to go with. And they can finally start to put this out there in all their socials and have people, not just giving blind deposits into the Vegas pot anymore. Because that's really, I'm sure maybe initially people were putting it in. I would be curious also to see what the numbers were as far as like, were people putting it in July? And then as the anticipation started to build, did less people start to put it in? I know we'll probably never get those actual numbers, but like I would really like to know what that effect was as well. And also how many seats people assumed there was going to be too. Like, the people think, oh, it'll probably end up at Allegiant, it'll be like 10,000 deposits. Well, okay, now you have 8,000 seats here. So now what happens? Like the number crunching there is going to be really interesting.
I thought that Max had a good comment. Like I said, if you haven't watched the live stream today, good comment where Redbird is so focused, right? Like we do all this research and we're so particular and meticulous and going through and we're researching all the football clubs and who do we want and Fenway Sport, like all these different things. And just to like hop into this and really not have any sort of parachute at all, or like, when we go play in Reno, we call it the Nevada Vipers, or like the West Coast Viper, like just that there was never any backup and then it just got to this point. I mean, worst case, if the deal doesn't get done last night, obviously assume we get the stuff next week. It's just another week. I mean, but you're getting to the point where, like I said, people needed to get stuff going. We need to be able to sell stuff. We need to be able to market. So I think we're good. I wanted to look at the press release. I think they put one other thing about just talking about the, Cashman, 10,000 seat venue, fans will have access to parking, concessions, tailgating. The other note on here is single game tickets are going for sale next a week from, we record this on the 12th. So you can get them for 7 of 8 venues. They have not announced yet when the Vegas venue is going for sale, which obviously makes sense because they got to figure out where they're putting those season ticket holders in there. So anything else on Cashman? Do you feel like we've kind of hit the nail on that? Anything else you want to talk about?
I mean, like I said, I'm going to make it my best efforts to go out there. So I will try to have a field report for you at some point and let people know what's going on out there. As far as which day that's going to be, I'm still sort of debating that. But like I said, I'm just glad this headache's over with. I mean, the schedule I was excited for. The Cashman thing, it was just a big, gigantic headache. It was something that I was not looking forward to really discussing any further with people.
Yeah. So they announced these. So obviously, the schedule came out today. The Cashman thing came out overnight. Vegas reported it came out. Big takeaways: Vegas Vipers in the kickoff game at Arlington there at Choctaw Stadium, February 18th. We've obviously had the date for a long time of that. 3 p.m. Eastern. That'll be 2 p.m. local time there. The other opening day game is going to be the Guardians at the Roughnecks. We have a lot of Texas, if you notice, home games that first weekend. TDECU 8:30, 7:30, whatever local, but Eastern time there. Battlehawks is going to be the big ABC game on Sunday there on the 19th at the Alamo Dome. And then the repeat from last time, I thought it was weird, like it's the kickoff game, but reverse. You're going to have the Dragons going out to the Defenders at Audi Field on ESPN. Thoughts on that? We have numbers and stuff from, each network's getting all the games and stuff, but that slate of games, having 3 Texas games, does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point of having the hub, right? The easy travel, being able to commute back and forth, really showcasing that this is going to be a very Texas-centric operation overall in every facet. I think this is really cool that we get to see all 3 Texas home teams, which I think will draw well. I really think San Antonio is going to absolutely knock it out of the park. I'm so excited for that operation. Houston, our colleague Evan Wilsmore is going to be at the Houston games. He said he's going to try and get down there and be able to operate down there. Roughneck, I mean, the Renegades make sense completely. It makes sense. That's the opening game. It is interesting that Vegas, after all that hullabaloo about getting their venue, and now they're on the road the first game. So that's kind of the funny thing. I don't know what their draw is going to be out there. But I think for the Renegades fans, it's a return to form. It's their home stadium. It's their home hub operation. Bob Stoops returns. I think it makes total sense that's going to be the first game on the schedule. But yeah, I think this is cool. I love that your Dragons are going to DC again. Like, that's a rematch of the opening game from last time. And I love that that's going to happen again. It's really cool. This time going to be at night instead of it being the first game on the Saturday like it was last time. But that's really cool. It's pretty exciting to see that happen again. But hopefully for you, it'll be a different result.
Yeah, we have, and then the Orlando, which people like all day, I've just heard people poo-poo on Orlando that they think they're going to be like the worst team. I think Pat in his interview said like I could go play quarterback for them at some point. But this is the simulcast game. We've gotten confirmation from this Mike and Tim over at the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast. Let me know as well with the ESPN press release. That's the simulcast on there. So kind of weird to get. I mean, obviously we're going to have a lot of FX games coming up, and we'll talk through all that, but what do you think about that? An ESPN FX simulcast for that, primetime game Saturday night? Yeah, obviously that's not the same level as the NBC Fox simulcast that the original USFL game was. I mean, that was a very, 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 much smaller scale on that. But I think it's a chance for them to showcase both streaming options, right? This is going to show you, okay, here's the ESPN one that you're going to be accustomed to.
Now here's the FX one, which you're going to have to get used to because you also broke it down with Max. There are going to be a number of FX broadcasts. So talking about what that's going to be and what operation is going to be. Look, if that's something that people want to kind of flip back and forth between and figure out like what the differences are, if there's any, in terms of presentation, that's fine. I think I'm curious to see how that goes. And I can't say I've ever heard of I never thought FX would have a simulcast, but then again, who knows? I mean, maybe it's better than the Cooking Channel, right? Obviously. So that's one thing to consider, but I have a lot of thoughts about the FX broadcast, which we can get into as well, but I think it's fine. It's not the most like glorious presentation, but I think it is something. And I am curious also, like if you have the ESPN app, obviously ESPN will be on that, but would that also be like the FX feed going through that too? I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, the point of this simulcast is the announcers every 30 seconds being like, a lot more of these games are going to be on FX. Like, please, I mean, obviously they would do whatever they have the ability to do here, but you almost need a couple of those games of like, hey, just keep in mind here, look at your remote, channel 152 or whatever. Like, hey, Fred, 55-year-old Fred that's watching the XFL here, like, just keep in mind, you're going to have to be able to find FX here next week, be able to find a lot of these games. Like it is, I think it's like we're educating the masses. Like this is where a lot of these games are going to be.
Well, I was going to say too, and I'm glad you brought that up. See, that's different than last year with the USFL. And suddenly I'm looking at my schedule and being like, oh, this game's on Peacock. Oh, I have to pay extra for Peacock. Like that was not a pleasant surprise. And look, maybe some people were more in the know than I was, but that was not something that even I was really pertinent to in like the middle of the season, like a month in, and suddenly I'm having to kind of like pay out of pocket for Peacock and having to watch a game for the weekend. So that's something also to keep in mind, like what services you have FX through, which I've looked through all of like the streaming options. They're pretty covered on a lot of different bases. Like you have them on like Sling. I think I have them right here. I can go through some of them. They're on Hulu TV, YouTube TV, Sling, Vidgo, Xfinity Choice TV, DirecTV, cable. So they're on different streaming services. It's not something that I think you're going to just go out of your way to pay for. It's going to be covered on a lot of different bases. So that's also something to keep in mind as well, versus Peacock, which was an extra service.
Yeah, don't tell anyone this. I never got Peacock and watched any of the USFL games. I didn't watch the four that were on there, the Maulers versus whatever on week. We had the numbers here. Max put them on the thing. FX is available to about 74.8 million subscribers. Was 79.7 in 2021. USA has a similar amount. So I was kind of under the impression that USA, because we're going to get all the USFL comparisons when we get to it. And I was scared. I'm scared, whatever XFL ratings and, having to argue people online and have all this stuff, but they have at least for basis a similar platform, which I think is good to be able to, as much as we can, apples to apples, compare some of these things. I was under the presumption that FX was a lot smaller, and it's not. They're about the same viewership on that. The other note I had was, so of the games we have, and we went through all this, but we have the numbers on here now. Yeah. All the games will be streamed also on ESPN Plus, which is very helpful. If you have that, I believe that's like $6.99 a month. That would probably be the easiest way to get a lot of this stuff. 43 games total, 40 regular season, 2 playoff championship, 7 games on ABC. I believe there was 22, 24 back in 2020 on like network TVs. ESPN2 is going to have 22 games. I believe that's split, across the board. And then FX has 15 of those games. So they're carrying the bulk of that. You said you had some other thoughts about the FX broadcast?
Yeah, just as like I said, the presentation and also in terms of like their outreach, but they are obviously included in all these other cable packages and streaming services, so it won't be as difficult to get into that. But I wanted to point out, so for your ESPN Plus platform, obviously that's useful in terms of it being another option. I think the big key to take away from here is you have different options. So like this, conversely, with, for example, the CFL schedule, like you go out of your way to get ESPN Plus if you want to watch certain CFL games, right? Like not all of them are on ESPN News and ESPN2. Some of them you have to have ESPN Plus for. This is not the case here. This is okay. Well, if you want to watch on ESPN Plus because you're away, or you want to watch on your phone, that's fine. But if you are in front of your cable service, or if you have, say, this like live TV that you've paid for, and you have it on your app on your phone, then you can watch it on ESPN or FX or ESPN2. So I think that the fact that you have those options is also very useful. It's catering to two different audiences. Whereas what we've seen with some of these other alternative leagues is they kind of split, where it's like, well, it's either this one or this one, and that I think this is more of a marrying of the two ideas, which is great. I think that is a better cohesion there, as far as like whether you have them on cable television. Obviously, if it not being on always being on ABC, I mean, that's one thing. But as long as you're kind of creating some sort of more cohesion with the digital platforms, I think that's a little bit better and a little more optional for people to delve into those games.
Do you believe that 7 ABC games is enough?
I would have liked more. I think I was hoping for double digits at least. That's kind of my thing. I would have liked at least 10 games, maybe 15 if possible. Obviously, look, ABC has a lot of programming. They have a lot of things they're going through, and they have a lot of stuff that they have to sort of, move through. I get it, but I do think that I would have liked to have seen more cable games. I'm not sure what the official number was last year for the USFL as far as how many games were on Fox versus how many games were on USFL, or excuse me, on NBC. But I want to see more of that as far as like cable games available here for the XFL. And it would have been nicer to have at least in the ballpark of 10 to 15. 7 is a little small for my liking.
So on NBC Sports here, they said there was 9 games on NBC, 9 on USA, 4 on Peacock, and then Fox had 14. So both Fox and NBC were each carrying separately more than obviously the XFL is on ABC, and then clearly both combined is a substantially higher number, just to put that in context.
Okay, so there you go. So then they obviously were catering more to the traditional cable audience. But then again, it was harder to find some of those non-cable games. And I think that's what the XFL was avoiding here. They were just saying, well, there'll be some cable games, but a lot more of it's going to be catering to, or the traditional cable games, obviously the big networks, but it's more traditionally towards ESPN, FX, and the mobile platforms. It's going to be more combined there. I think the thing they want to really avoid here is, not exclusively putting things on, like, say, for example, Disney Plus, which who knows, maybe that'll happen eventually in the future, because there are some platforms that are already starting to do that, but I have not seen that as far as sporting options go with Disney Plus yet. I know obviously we live in a world where Amazon Prime already has an exclusive right to a weekly NFL game. So, that might be on the option, but for right now, XFL cannot afford to really experiment with that option. They might down the road, but for now, just keep it this way. I think this is better. It marries both options and it keeps it more cohesive. But I think it just shows you also maybe there's a little bit difference in audience catering between the USFL and the XFL. I think I think there is a difference. I know everyone in the universe who is an alt football junkie says they consume both. I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with that. I think there are people who do pick and choose. I think you and I both know that there are people who do pick sides, and I think that's also a difference in terms of the viewership habits as well. Those people.
Yeah, that was the issue with USFL, was you were catering to a substantially older audience that was obviously like the nostalgia of the USFL, and so when. Yes, I can watch Fox. I can watch NBC when I don't know even how to get to FS1. I mean, let alone Peacock on that. I think if they would have done the Disney Plus thing, that would have been a death knell. I mean, that just would have been the worst thing in the world to have any exclusive. NFL can get away with that with like ESPN or NFL Plus exclusives, like when they go to Germany or whatever. To me, this, and I was talking with like Seth today, and I was talking with you guys, and I was talking with everyone offline, like, it just doesn't feel like this is like we're I was talking with Jason over at X Fan Puck. I'm like, I want to make sure I was talking with Dirty over there. It just doesn't feel like it's a priority. Like, we're not prioritizing a lot of these games. I mean, Fox and NBC also looked at USFL as this is a space filler, right? Where like we would rather air this content than Mrs. Doubtfire reruns or like whatever we're airing at, Sunday at 1 PM. But like, it doesn't feel to me like putting so many of these on. I don't know, the time slots, they're late. We have some key matchups here. We'll talk about some notes, but just nothing strikes me as like we're going out of our way to give this better view, better slotting than we could otherwise.
Yeah, that's fair. And, that's makes me wonder if there's maybe kind of a prove it factor here as far as, okay, well, if we really want to put you more on ABC, we need to make sure that you're actually a viable option, you're a sustainable option. Because again, this is not like Fox, which owns the USFL and says, hey, look, we were going to put this on our programming. We don't care. This is different because this is a partnership with a different entity. And if ESPN is going to be, playing second fiddle to ABC, it's kind of saying like, hey, ABC, we want you to believe in this. And maybe ABC says, well, okay, but we got to see some of the numbers first. And if it goes well, then we'll be willing to put more of that forward. And, in another world, I wonder if that would have been the case with, say, for example, like the AAF. Now, the AAF had a much lesser TV deal. It was a lot harder to get access to their stuff, even more so because I remember trying to watch like rogue streams, getting access to like CBS Sports Network and other stuff like that. And that's something where I wonder, like, would they put more games on CBS in the future if they, proved it more so to their audience? This is kind of a similar concept, maybe in terms of, okay, if you want to put it more on cable television, original cable television, do you have to show the numbers first? Do you have to have the ratings? Do you have to kind of have a proof of concept again here? Because Fox and NBC, I think, proved that enough, and I think they're willing to do that again. We'll wait and see what that schedule looks like, too, if they're going to put more games on those major networks, or if they're going to do maybe status quo and kind of do the same thing they did last year. I'm also wondering what they adjust versus they did in season one.
Very curious. No, I'm really curious to see kind of how USFL responds, and like, them seeing now the track record, they kind of know the numbers. I mean, USFL did, pretty consistently, decent numbers, depending really on the network and the time of day. A couple other things, ESPN Plus, 24.3 million subscribers, just to kind of put your mindset. Remember, FX has about 75 million subscribers. ESPN, as proper, has 76 million subscribers. And FX on the whole averages about 462,000 viewers, while USA averages around 738. So about the same, obviously households that are going to get them. USA on average doubles FX in terms of like who is actually watching. A lot of that has to do with the content. I mean, for years I grew up like FX has the movies, like that's what you knew, and they just re-aired old movies on there. Where I think USA has done a really good job in the last probably 2 decades now of trying to build quality content, right? With like Suits and all of that stuff, or your White Collar, all these kind of whatever shows. The other thing is, Max pointed out in the live stream and on this, like FX really is wanting to be rebranded as more of a sports network. And so that they think that this has a lot to do with that. You get people used to watching XFL on FX. That'll crescendo into other properties that we can put on there. Any thoughts on any of those numbers? Anything there?
Well, maybe they buy out the league and they just become the FXFL. How about that? So that's some synergy there, huh? Yeah, you like that?
I like that. I like that.
But yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, that's what I grew up doing too. I watched movies traditionally on that channel, and now they're sort of trying to become. Look, everyone wants to make their own content, right? And sports live content is gold. It's certified gold, and it's something that everyone wants. And ESPN obviously has proven that, and there's something that is to be said about having that on your network. So this is again a proof of concept for them, and maybe something that they can continue to invest their time and money into going forward.
I have a note on here, and this gets into like this will be like, oh, you're the XFL homer or whatever. Like Max has a note. If you have both FX, for example, and ESPN Plus, or you're choosing to watch on ESPN versus whatever, we're not going to get the streaming numbers. We're only going to get the TV numbers, and that's going to hurt the viewership that way. I don't know. I think it is what it is. I mean, you can stream stuff on the NBC app. I on Fox as well. Are they counting all that? I don't think there's going to be tens of thousands of people that are streaming the ESPN games. It would not be. I don't know. Is that a negligible number? Am I wrong there?
I think with the younger audience, it might be. And I think that is something to consider, obviously. I think it could really affect those overall numbers. And then everyone's going to squarely look at the Nielsen ratings and try and decipher it that way. But, again, it's in terms of like marketing and in terms of like putting those numbers forward, that obviously is going to be done more so under the, in the back rooms and sort of said, hey, look, we got this number versus this number. But that's not going to be published, obviously. And that's something that has to be talked about in the greater scheme of things. I know. And look, I know the TV number it's important. Obviously it's always been important, but I do think that could see that some of those numbers in maybe the tens of thousands would go to those streaming platforms. Again, this is more of a marrying of the concept. There's two different options, and with those options, people are going to sway towards one or the other. So I do think that's going to happen. But I think overall, and we'll get into this more, is the consistency of the schedule is the most important part. And that's going to really bear out and seeing, okay, how many people on average are really getting into this? And are we getting that kind of reaction from game to game and time slot to time slot, which we've talked about with USFL, but that'll remain to be seen.
The other note we have, and I have the schedule up on here. You can go to XFL.com. They have the schedule, but it's all spread out. It's really hard to kind of like, I mean, I know this is like tiny man font, but really hard to, they don't have like a nice printable one. The one that they shared on social is like so tiny. If you look on here though, you know, a lot of the FX, you see, obviously we have the kickoff game, ABC, right? And then we go, you know, ESPN, whatever this, FX, you know, the whole way down. You get to the later half. I don't want to pin that. You get to the later half of the season, you get a lot more AABC, ESPN, all the way through leading. The note I had is this trying to lead more to a crescendo. We're trying to hide maybe some of the worst gameplay. You know, we get a couple good games out of the way. Teams just trying to figure themselves out. I know USFL, my thing with them was always, I thought the rush 2.5 weeks of training camp, you spiked the big rating, and then the other 3 games the first weekend were like total, really, they were not good games. And I think that really hurt people checking it back in again. Do you buy into that like, okay, let's get some of these games hidden on the lesser networks until the teams are ready to vibe?
I suppose so. Again, I think
okay, it's kind of a stretch, but it's a thought.
Okay. So these teams that are hiding, quote unquote, it really depends. Like, I mean, if they're playing hide and go seek, that's great. But like, I think they have a lot of things to consider as far as the viewership numbers. Okay, so we went through Cashman Field in Vegas. Okay, that's going to be a bit of a project. We don't know with that. Obviously, they knew that, and that was going to be something they had to factor into the schedule. I think your biggest draws, if I'm going to just come out and probably have a guess, it's going to be DC. It's going to be San Antonio, and I'm going to say Seattle. I think Seattle fans are definitely going to show back up, and I think that'll be a thing again. I think that Legion will return. Houston and Arlington are going to be interesting. I think we're going to see. I believe Houston definitely has probably a stronger, or at least maybe a more prevalent fan base, but I think the Arlington crowd can also draw really well. I think the Texans teams are fine. The Orlando crowd is really interesting. I am so curious to see how people react to there's no Vipers left that moved out of town from Tampa, and B, having the Guardians in there instead, and the logos, and supposedly the worst quarterback room and all that nonsense. You know, I know, but like, I still think Orlando people will probably show up. I think the Camping World Stadium is still really nice. And I actually watched a lot of the bowl games this past week, and a lot of them were actually in the XFL stadiums. Like the Alamo Bowl was in the Alamo Dome, and you had Camping World Stadium for the Cheez-It Bowl. Yes, one of the 2 Cheez-It Bowls. I know there were 2 of them, but and that was Florida State fans, so they all traveled to that game. But it was the presence in it was really, really immense. So I think some of the games, yes, I could see them like trying to kind of like piecemeal and figure out, okay, like, all right, is this going to work out? Are people going to show up for the games? Are people going to actually be in droves? Are you going to have like generated fan interest? But like, I think most of the markets make sense. Really, the only one, again, that I initially was not sure about was when they announced that they were going to Vegas, because there was no template. There was no book on that. We had books on all these other markets we had seen in other facets and other ways. I know Vegas was, I mean, the Outlaws, but that was like 20 years ago. You know, the landscape has changed in Vegas. It's a different ball game there. But we knew recent history. We knew all these other markets. So I don't know if there's so much like of hiding so much, but I do think there might be some finagling as far as they want to put more emphasis on those teams that they know will do well. They know that they will draw well. Case in point, I think the fact that St. Louis is not playing until week 4, I think they know those fans are going to show up anyways. I'm just going to say it. Now, I know there's venue conflicts with that. I understand that it's not all, it's scheduling, and it's not just like, hey, we're just going to punt all this Battlehawk fans a month into the season. I don't think it's that, but I do think they are willing to accept that, hey, look, maybe they're still going to show up, because if they really thought it was a concern, I think they would put it on a Thursday night on like week 2.
Yeah, so and a couple other quirks. Yeah, so we talked the St. Louis one. That's good. Vegas not at home till week 2, right? Obviously, they're in the kickoff. That gives them an extra week. We're trying to sell tickets, relate to the game there. They're on FX the first 2 times they play, week 2 and then week 3, back to back. They're home FX, and then they go on week 7. They go to ESPN. So maybe they're like, by that point, we feel that maybe Cashman will be overflowing with people that people will be in swarms to tailgates. But I think there's maybe a little bit of scheduling quirks there. I do not understand, and this is Reed's brand. It doesn't really matter. This Seattle Sea Dragons schedule is literally the worst schedule of any of the teams. We play 2 Thursday games. We play Easter Sunday, and then one of the other games, and this is a Reed problem, is on the same night as a Kraken game. So that's 4 of 5 home games. The first game is this Sunday night, the 6 p.m. kickoff, Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. I just wild to me that do you have any thoughts on the Seattle one? The next one is it's another night, like they're late night, 9 p.m. games, both on Thursdays, week 5 and week 2. Any thoughts on the Dragons?
I kind of echo what Max said in the stream. It's like Pac-12 after dark. It's like, all right, well, you're just going to get those late Eastern Coast times because, it's the West Coast crowd. That's what matters most. I don't know if I agree with that necessarily. I do think you got a little bit of the short end of the stick. Now, it is kind of a concept to prove maybe, okay, let's see if the East Coast audience stays up for these games. And I mean, there are other teams in central time zones. I mean, I know the Vipers, that's a purely West Coast game. You're not really going to get that entire audience. So that does unfortunately rain on the parade a little bit, but you are going to have some other teams that are coming from further out of town that are going to still draw that audience. So I don't know if it's like the worst schedule, but I do think it's unfortunate that it's not as consistent as some of the other schedules because a lot of the other teams are just, Saturdays and Sundays, and it's strictly that. I do like that there is not really any Friday games. There's one Friday game. I was very adamant about it not being Friday games. I think Friday nights are off limits as far as professional football goes. Like that just does not work. I don't think it worked with the USFL in my opinion. I really did not like that they were on Friday nights. I really didn't like that. And the ratings showed it, right? The ratings were not very good on Friday nights for any of their games. I think it's keeping it around traditional NFL viewing times like Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Like that's like programmed in everyone's brains. That's the times you watch that. Friday night is for high school football. It's for maybe college football sometimes. It's for CFL. It's not for professional football out in the United States, in my opinion.
Shots fired. CFL, not professional football. Andy Murray.
In the United States, I added that at the end.
Okay,
you missed that part.
Okay.
Don't erase that part. Don't wipe that out.
I used to love when I worked in Bakersfield, I loved working Fridays. We would go shoot the high school football games. That was like the most fun thing. I got paid extra because that was my day off, got to come in, and we had like our sports director. Keep in mind, I'm not that old. Like we had GPS, right? We were able to plug in really the old school ones. Like you'd have to buy the GPS mounted to your car. But he would literally draw paper maps out like with pen and be like, hey, I can't see it. Like, hey, Reed. So like, here's the road. And you did it. I'm like, Todd, just give me the address. I'll plug it in. I'll plug it in the GPS. The other note, a couple of quirks. So USFL kickoff is Saturday, April 15th. That will be week 9 of the XFL. That there's been a lot of debate, like how much overlap, whatever. You could do the math and kind of figure it out. Saturday, you have a 12:30 Eastern. So that is a early morning game. Vegas Vipers at Houston Roughnecks, and then a Saturday night game, 7 p.m. Guardians at Brahmas. Large gap there. It's kind of, I am looking at that, right? It seems kind of weird. Thoughts on that? Week 9, 10, then obviously the playoffs going opposite that. A lot of ESPN and ABC. No FX games after week 7, it looks like.
So, yeah, I was looking at that gap. I wonder, and this is pure speculation on my part. So is there potential that this is anticipation of when eventually there are going to be USFL games on the schedule? Is that going to allow for time and space for those USFL games to come onto TV? Now, again, we'll see how religious the schedule is for the USFL. It was a little bit all over the map last time they came online last year. And so we'll see where they go as far as, like, I think they're still going to play games on Friday, off time Saturday midday, Sunday midday. This is going to be really interesting to see how they finagle the schedule. This is where the TV rating things come. It really comes into play of, okay, how much sword battling are we going to see between Fox and ESPN? And I think with that in mind, considering what we have here on 9 and 10, especially, I think that allows you to believe that there is going to be some space to finagle that schedule. And it's going to be like, hey, here's your space. If you want to be there, that's fine. Here's our space. Let's not get in each other's way. Again, will they do that? I don't know. Maybe they'll just go to war and say, no, we're going to be at the same time or around the same time as you. But that seems to be a space that can potentially happen. So that's my initial thought looking at that spacing on 9, 10, 11.
Yeah. The interesting thing, the other note that we've had, there is no week 12. The week 13 is going to be the championship game. We don't have obviously sites yet for where the championship and playoff games would be. Remember in XFL 2020, it was going to be in Houston for the title game. Did the playoff games? I think that was going to be seeding, right, where the playoffs were going to be. But the championship game was going to be neutral site. The bye week, the Kentucky Derby is that bye week. You'll remember there was a lot of drama last year with the USFL that people, the Kentucky Derby led in, and it was the bigger. I don't know. I can't imagine them taking the week off to avoid that, but they are taking the week off. I don't know if we need 2 weeks of build up and you're paying the people. And like, that seems weird to me that we're going to have a week of no pay. I mean, at that point, you only have the 2 teams left, but that just seems weird to me that there's a gap there. What do you make of the gap? You said you had a theory, and then do you think the the championship game is going to be neutral site down in like Choctaw?
I do think it's going to be in Choctaw. I think that's just going to, it's a logical destination. It's where everything is. And I think that's, to return to the hub makes sense, right? You start the season in Choctaw, you end the season in Choctaw. I think that's kind of the idea there. I don't think they're going to do any like Canton stuff like the USFL did. I think that was just in the interest of getting away from Birmingham and having a different location and some fresh things to kind of look at, some fresh scenery.
Well, remember, and they had the games, the
World Games. Sorry,
they had the World Game. But I mean, that was, and I think they're like, we got to get the hell out of here. We got to get out of here.
I think that ended up being a good thing for them, honestly. Going to Canton was really cool, and I think that was a good idea overall. But yes, the World Games also got in that way too. And thank you for reminding me. But no, I think really the big thing here, besides the Kentucky Derby, which again, I don't know how much that's going to affect the TV audience for the football crowd. I don't know if the football crowd is also horse enthusiasts or equestrian, proponents, but I do think they have to have that week off, because then you get a bye week for the players, because you've been playing 11 straight weeks at that point. You have put your body through the ringer at that point, and you need to maybe have a week off of rest if you're going to go into a championship game. And that's only going to be a select number of players. Obviously it's only 2 teams, but that's still enough that it's going to affect a lot of people. And I think having that time off is really crucial. Meanwhile, everyone else can kind of go do their thing and go figure out, like, all right, I'm going to go, I'm signed on to a team, which that time schedule too is really important, because again, the draft is the end of week 11, which I think I talked about a little bit with Mike earlier, is that you're going to transition from the last day of the draft on Saturday into one of the playoff games. You're going to be able to transition. That's very like synergetic thinking by ESPN. So that makes a lot of sense. But in terms of the player pool, now you've got undrafted free agents after the draft looking for opportunities, and you got other people trying to like sprint over to an NFL team, be like, hey, I want to get into mini camps that are going to start like in OTAs that are going to start in May. So now you start to allow that window of opportunity and kind of let people sort of wander into that afterwards. And I wonder if the bye week is kind of just like, hey, look, you guys, if you want to come to the championship game and wait around, cool. If not, you just want to go home, or you want to go, figure out if you have a shot in the next league, then go for it. So that might be also the thinking there too. But I really think the big one is the bye week.
The other note, and just put your tinfoil hat out for this, but just worthwhile sharing. So Joe Sigler on Twitter, when they posted the thing today about the schedule and all that, he is apparently a Dallas Jackals, which is the rugby team that also plays at Choctaw. He's also season ticket holder, whatever, for them. They had told him that there wasn't going to be coinciding games, and apparently they have a game for the championship game, at the end of whatever that would be. I don't always take that verbatim, just because like someone know, and they haven't announced it yet, and like, well, we don't count the champion, like someone says regular season, whatever, but just keep that in mind, keep open. I'll be really curious to see where the championship game is, just because obviously I'll be going out to that. I think that'll be fun, but could be. I agree with you, Andy. I think Chata makes the most sense. I always like to put out, I did have this note to make sure we talked about that as just like a potential whatever on that. It's earlier in the day. They could, you could flip it and it's turf. So you could have both the same, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. By the way, in terms of accommodating clubs or clubs that actually want to do that, shout out to the Vegas Lights for putting out and not playing a home game for like 2 months into the MLS season and letting everybody kind of get into Vegas to watch the Vipers and not have to watch any soccer for the first 2 months. Shout out to them, because that is like almost unfathomable in pro sports. Like, to not have a home game for the first 2 months of the season, that's almost unfathomable. And I think for them to be able to figure that out and have that be accommodable, shout out to them. That's honestly not something they had to do, and I think they could have put their foot down. But I think I'm thankful that they were allowed to do that. I was just thinking in terms of like other teams playing in venues hosted by the XFL.
It's almost unfathomable to not have a home game for that long, unless you were the the St. Louis Battlehawks, and then you are used to not having a home game for a long time.
Oh my god! But think about it though. Think about how much of a home field advantage that is from now on the back end too. Like, I know that's a pain, but if they go into that like home game going up 2-1 or 3-0, like, you're set for the rest of the season. You have a huge advantage on your side the rest of the way. I definitely think Coach Anthony Becht will make that a point, maybe, is that, okay, look, there's an option. It's going to be rough on the road a little bit, but if you are able to get that advantage going into that late home slate, that's huge for them down the stretch. And I think either way, like I said, I think those fans are going to show up and be maniacs regardless of what the record is.
A couple more things, we'll get out of here. North-South divisions, we touched on it. We got the news because it was kind of buried in the press release. We did touch on it on the live stream. Do we need divisions? I just would have done aid and done seeding points or whatever. We have the North Division. That's basically everybody but Texas and Orlando. Orlando is going to be in the South with Texas. Do we like this at all? I don't.
Yeah. So I think in the traditional sense that divisions, I do think ultimately work. I know people have been debating that. That's becoming a point of debate recently, especially with teams like, in the NFL with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, potentially finishing under 500 and they've already won their division title. It's like, I get that's a thing, but here's my deal about it. It's like, if it's that tough, go win the game, go win the playoff game in their home. And guess what? That doesn't happen most of the time. I ran the numbers the other day. People do not put up their end of the deal and win those wild card games anyway, so I don't want to hear it. But as far as this format goes, since it's a less, it's not a league with a lot of lineage or tradition, and they seem to already play out of a hub as it is, then yeah, or not a hub, but like they have a hub, format as far as like their operations and everything. Yeah, I don't think they have to have divisions. I don't think it's really that important. I agree with you. They could mix it up a little bit, but I'm not upset about it. And I do get that like Texas is like one big thing. I mean, it is kind of funny that Orlando is like the redheaded stepchild in that division. It's like, oh, you're the only one that's not in this state of ours. Sorry. So I feel like they're just keep getting the short end of the stick in a lot of ways. But it is interesting though that there are these divisions. I thought initially there was going to be an East and West. That was kind of my thinking. But then again, with there being three teams in one state, it's kind of hard to argue for that, because it's like, well, are you talking me like East Texas being one side and like West Texas being the other side, like stuff like that. So I think that's kind of, it makes sense in this configuration, but I agree with you. I would not have minded if they just said there are no divisions, just whoever has a better record gets in the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that I don't. North-South in the USFL makes a little bit more sense, just because obviously geographically and they're all East Coast and you can't do it all that way. One note, I just got texted. I guess Stribling went back to, and Mike posted in the thing too. Channing Stribling went back to the Stars. He was signed to the Battlehawks. So that was a big loss. USFL. That's another XFL. XFL drafted player that played the USFL, drafted the XFL, chose to go back to the USFL. So I just wanted to make sure that was touched on here, because I don't see me recording anything else today to touch on that. We did the divisions. I just a couple more notes on here. We'll try to get out. Do you have any other general thoughts? we have like Max has a bunch of like really specific, like, we have a bunch of late games in Seattle, 6 games at 9 p.m. or later. 5 of those are, Seattle for 4 of those Pacific time. There's a 10 local, 10 Eastern. Any other weird scheduling anomalies? Anything else you want to talk about? The 1 Monday game, 4 total weekday games, the Monday, 2 Thursdays, and a Friday.
I know you're not happy about the Seattle being on a Thursday night, but I actually like the idea of a Thursday night game regardless. I think that's cool. And I like the Monday night game again. I don't like a couple of the games being that 10 p.m. slot, that right there in week 5. That's really brutal, especially with it being so far apart from each other. Like that Saturday is 10 p.m. and then bam, next day, Sunday is 10 p.m. Eastern. Like that's really going to test some people's resolve and see if they're going to actually tune in, especially that Sunday night. So we'll see where that stands at that point. Other than that, I think, and this is something that goes without saying, but this is going to test to see how much March Madness affects this, because we did not get to see that last time. We did not see the results of that last time and how much they're going to be able to kind of get around that a little bit. Because as we all know, March Madness, the first 2 weeks just run straight through from Thursday through Sunday. So regardless of where you put your games, it's going to be affected in one way or another. You just kind of try to like push through it and motor through it as much as you can. Maybe they could have put more weekday games. Like I think by the time you get to week 6, you have that Monday game, then you won't be affected by it. Obviously, there's not going to be a Monday, NCAA game, but that is something that is going to be monitored, I'm sure. And that was already something that people were starting to talk about back when the XFL aired, because I think that weekend was championship games, conference championship games. So they were getting close to it. We'll see how that works this time.
One more, just Seattle getting the shaft here. Week 1, we play the last game on Sunday. We play the next game on Thursday. We have to travel from DC back to Arlington and then up to Seattle. I mean, talking about cross country, time zones, travel. I mean, I'm tooting the horn here. I think this is rigged against Seattle.
Okay. So are you going to start naming names, or what's going on here? I feel like this was just an excuse for me to come up to do therapy for you in your Seattle.
I can't even go to that game.
Was.
I can't even go to that game. But you should definitely come up for you should come up for the 1 Sea Dragons game I can actually attend. I have front row tickets, 50-yard line. You should, whatever game that is. There's only one. You should come to that. The other thing I wanted to mention, there is one Friday game. We touched on that, right?
Yes. Okay. There is one Friday game. Yeah.
One for the Friday game. And then the last note, and obviously thoughts and prayers to Mar Hamlin, everything going on. I've touched at the top of the show, the back of the show as I've recorded all this. Debate today, even when we did the live stream, is there going to be pushback of the season? Mike's been going crazy in the group chat talking, their NFL is going to resolve all that, not play the game and coin flip, or, maybe they'll just do like an XFL scramble to figure out what team gets the neutral site game. But that will not affect. I did not think that they would push back the Super Bowl. Like, I did not think that was a worthwhile endeavor to do, but it's just good to know that everything, now we can just, not that was the major concern, but we can focus on DeMar, everything happening with that XFL season. We don't need to worry about that. So,
yeah, my thoughts and prayers to him too. There's been some encouraging news as far as his recovery. I'm glad to see that, because the last time I recorded a podcast actually was on Monday, and it was during that time. And man, it was hard to get through that. Just watching that in the background, it was really rough, and watching all the post game coverage was just heartbreaking. But I'm encouraged to see what some of the results are as far as his recovery goes. But in terms of the schedule, I think that there was never really going to be a possibility of the Super Bowl is getting pushed. Like, that's a deadlocked date. That's not happening. What I did think might happen is that some of the playoff games and the overall schedule would get shifted up. And then what would happen is there wouldn't be a bye week before the Super Bowl, and they would just kind of obfuscate the Pro Bowl flag football thing that they were going to do, or, put it on a different day or whatever. But I don't think that's going to be a choice now either. I think they're just, they already said they're basically canceling the game, and they're not going to be able to make it up. And they're just going to try and do some weird finagling. I could see the NFL just kind of doing some whatever voodoo magic they have to do on the results of that, and outbearing of that result of that whole event. But no, I never thought for 1 minute that Super Bowl schedule was going to get pushed back. What I do think, though, and I might just write out with this, and maybe I'll put on my tinfoil hat here, is I think eventually we are going to get 18 game schedules in the NFL. And I think it's going to be on President's Day weekend that the Super Bowl is, because then they can have that day off for people who are going to school the next day, and they can just basically have that. So eventually I think that's something that maybe the XFL will have to think about, but they can kick that can down the road and think about it later. But that's something that I think eventually will happen.
Well, and give teams 2 buys. Do CFL, give them 2 buys, extend the season. It works great in the CFL. You get 3 buys in the CFL. I mean, it's a longer season, but you play a ton more games and you get, it's works out.
I cannot believe the NFL Players Association was not able to argue for that. Like when you were adding to the 17th game, like they have to add another bye, right? Nope, they didn't. That short, not having that rest is so critical for players. And honestly, that's the other thing. If they had just played that Bills Bengals game week 18 and then they pushed everything back and gave it an extra week for everyone, I think that would have been great for everybody. And honestly, it would have made everyone healthier going into the last week in the playoffs. In my opinion, I think that would have been a win-win situation, but the NFL doesn't see it that way. They have to keep the status quo. But God, if they do add another game, they better add another bye week, because that's just so brutal. It's ridiculous that the CFL has 3 bye weeks and just 1 more week of games, and they give plenty of rest to everybody. And here we are with the NFL just, having one little measly week off. So,
well, I think that's good. We'll get out of here. I'll show my cracking jersey one more time. Appreciate it, Andy. I think, calling you a lot here during the season as well. Lots of other stuff. Pat's coming up and everything else. Anything else from you? Really appreciate your time.
Hopefully it's not just calling, and I'll actually cross paths with you in person. I think this is the reality now, so we can actually look forward to that. I can't wait. And I'm sorry about your Kraken schedule. If you need to opine to it, anybody else, I'm sure you will over, a few more Yard House beers or something like that. But
well, and I was so offended. You said you were in the group chat. You're like, hey, I need one of those hotels. Pat was like giving away hotels. I need one of those hotels if I go to Seattle. I'm like, Andy, I live like 12 minutes from the stadium. Like you don't have to. Like I was almost offended. That you would even think that you would have to look for a hotel.
I don't want to assume that someone just wants me to roll over their couch and
we have a guest bed, everything. We got the whole shebang. Andrew Murray here. We're gonna get off. I'm gonna go grab some dinner here. Really appreciate your time coming off of work and everything else like you do.
Oh, always, Reed. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm excited. We had Pat on back, XFL Draft calling in. Now we get Pat back on. We were going to originally do just Battlehawks training camp, but obviously XFL schedule stuff. We'll talk that first and then get Pat's thoughts on the rosters here for training camp. Pat, how are you doing, sir?
Busy day, but I'm glad I could make time for you, of course.
It's good. I appreciate it. So first and foremost, Battlehawks schedule coming out. First home game isn't until week 4. I know there were some scheduling difficulties with the Dome. I don't know what happens when you have a 2-year head start and we are ready to this. What did you make? I know you've been running around, but initial thoughts on the Battlehawks schedule.
I mean, it's great that they're coming back. Personally, for me, it kind of makes my life a little bit easier because I do travel for work. So now it's like, okay, 3 weeks I will be in St. Louis, no problem. I'm able to knock out all 3 of those games. So there is a convenient part to that, maybe. As far as with the Dome, as people know, they do a lot of random stuff there, from conventions to other sporting events to concerts. So, it might be an easier sell in the initial push for this to have, 3-week blocks. But regardless, and we've talked about this in nauseam, St. Louis is starving for football. Just give it to these people. They deserve it. And maybe ease the passing of Stan Kroenke burning all these people.
I've seen comments, God, going into week 4, you better hope the Battlehawks are at least competitive. Last thing you want is an 0-3 team going into week 4. Do you think that matters, or that St. Louis is going to be so happy anyway?
I mean, if you want to have that conversation, I think in week 8 when they return back, I'll listen to you. But at this point, you could have put your local JV high school team, put the name St. Louis in front of it, and people are going to show up for week 4. So maybe that's a little bit crass, but I mean, we all know Dirty's going to be there, so he'll bring the crowd.
Dirty, yeah, I saw Dirty. Yeah, Dirty's been on the Twitter video saying everyone sell it. The Battlehawks Brahmas, I thought that was an interesting choice for one of the more marquee games. 2 p.m, but it's one of the ABC slots, one of only 7, I think, that the XFL gets during the season. What do you make of that as one of the kickoff games? St. Louis going into San Antonio against the Battlehawks or against the Brahmas?
Well, with Texas being the prime jewel of the XFL, and it is obviously where they're running their HQ out of and everything. I mean, it's going to sell tickets. San Antonio is another city that we've always heard about putting football there and whatnot. So it's not a terrible thing. I'm really pumped that they did go all home team, like week one, everyone in Texas. Financially, it makes sense since they're all working out of there. And, I'm sure it's a little bit cheaper to fly into DC maybe than Seattle. So I think they did the right thing fiscally. And with all these spring leagues, in my opinion, it all comes down to money. Just let's get through year one. Let's get through year two. Okay, after 2 years of football, now we can start doing who's good, who's not, all that stuff. And now we can make more primetime games. Because regardless of what these teams look like on paper, I mean, we could argue that A.J. McCarron is technically the best quarterback because he played in the NFL, had some success in the NFL. But we all know what's going to happen is once these guys actually take the field. And then from there, we can build the brands and the fan bases. So, Jags, this year, Jags Titans is a little bit more fun to watch. But, no one wants to see Thursday night NFL kickoff, Texans, whatever the worst team in the league. Texans Bears isn't selling as many tickets as Bengals Bills or Chiefs Bengals or go down that list. So then we can actually understand, okay, these teams have been together. Now these are marquee matchups because Ryan Willis was the MVP 2 times in a row or something like that.
Yeah, it's hard to get my head wrapped around. I know Mike posted his article, and everyone's kind of getting their articles out as they can with, their respective teams and their breakdowns. It is still hard to just where we don't have depth charts yet. We don't know. We have these quarterback battles we're going through. It's still trying to figure out. We have the alumni guys, like you said before we started recording, still getting added on this week via XFL analyst on Instagram. It's still hard for me to get my head wrapped around Team A versus Team B at this point.
Yeah, and I think we saw that with the USFL when people are like, Team X is going to be number one. And it's like, maybe you could be right, but no one has ever been a Birmingham Stallion, a DC Defender. None of these, very limited amount of these guys are returning to their original team and whatnot. So while it's good to speculate and it gets people going and jarring, when I do my analysis, I'm going off pure speculation because I can't judge a 2015 A.J. McCarron 5-2 for the Bengals leading them to the playoffs. I can't judge the spring league Ryan Willis because he hasn't really played football in 2 years. So it's all fun for speculation, but like everything, we'll understand what's going on once the players hit the field and begin putting film together. Because even in the USFL right now, we can't even really judge that because a lot of those teams are different, and the best team might be in the USFL the team that was maybe a 4-6, 3-7 gamblers because they are bringing back a lot of consistent pieces. So we can argue about who's the best team, but we're not going to know until week 1 or 2. And you always know, no matter what in the alt league, week 1 and 2 is going to be very ugly.
I'll be curious to see how, and obviously I didn't live through the XFL media stuff back. I was just a fan in 2020, but how much of the week to week, like footballness of it drives podcast views and interest in that way. I will tell you, say for the XFL or the USFL lawsuit, Kickoff, kind of that stuff, I'd have 2-3 guys on, Yahoo Sports, whoever, every week talking through USFL, breaking down the rosters. Not a lot of interest there, at least just in comparison to like, hey, USFL is, suing over the trademarks. I'll be curious to see if XFL, maybe if it's a different type of football, higher quality, if people just care more about the initials for whatever reason, just if that carries the conversation more.
I think it will because you're going into technically the 3rd season of the XFL. And then you add in Danny and The Rock. People know those names. So the name notoriety that revolves around the XFL is way sexier than the USFL. And we are going through the 3rd season of this. Yes, you can argue that it was the 4th season of the USFL, but I am 29 years old. I remember XFL 1.0. I was on contract in 2020, and I remember watching XFL 2.0. There's a lot of people who are in that same, bracket. And even if they missed out on XFL 1.0, they may have caught the UFL. they definitely call it the AAF if they're listening to your show. So you're getting these, niche diehards, and then you're adding in the casual viewers of The Rock who are like, oh, The Rock owns a football team? That's cool, as we've talked about on the show multiple times. And then you're actually putting the teams in the market, regardless of the fan shortage of the Birmingham hub. People showed up to Birmingham games. So even if someone's a casual viewer of the DC Defenders, which I think could be the weakest market of these teams, people are still going to go because, I mean, like a $20 ticket, not a crazy thing. Let's do this. Let's go show out for this, whatever this DC Defenders are.
Do you like, friend of our show and the Spring League and everyone else we've tracked, USFL? Do you like having Brian Scott potentially in that marquee kickoff game on February 18th?
I like whatever Brian Scott does because I do believe he is an NFL quarterback. And I think right now he just needs to put together 10 games of healthy film. Now, when I say he's an NFL quarterback, there are 96, at a minimum, 96 people who are an NFL quarterback. So just because I think that doesn't mean he'll be, on the sidelines every day and dressed up, or even in uniform or whatever on the practice squad. Regardless of that, I do think it's great for him. If anyone knows who Brian Scott is, his journey is beautiful. If you're listening to this show, you don't know who he is. I'm a little bit disappointed, but the fact that Brian has been through a lot, especially with this injury, especially with the way him and Bart started getting that offense rolling, I think it's great that he has the opportunity because, mind you, he has to fight with Luis Perez and Jalen McClendon to get on that field to be the marquee guy that kicks this thing off. So nothing would be cooler than Brian Scott doing a rolling out versus Kyle Sloter, and they put up each 36 points, in a 36-35 shootout where one of those guys wins. And they both throw 3 touchdowns each.
Yeah, it's not lost on me that, and I know we're doing the Battlehawks and we'll get to that in a second, whether well, first off, do you think Brian has the leg over Luis Perez? I mean, do you presume Brian's the number 1 starter?
That's a hard decision because I know exactly who Luis Perez is, and I know who Jalen McClendon is, and that offense looks a lot like the New Jersey Generals, which Luis Perez led to, obviously, that 9-1 record. But I do think Brian Scott is, air quote, a way sexier quarterback to Luis Perez, putting his 18 of 24, a tad, plus or minus 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, where I could see Brian putting up a 300-yard game with 3 touchdowns and, really airing it out. Especially if they keep that similar offense he ran with the Stars, but they're kind of different quarterbacks. Brian's a little bit smaller. He's kind of got a little bit more swag to him, and Luis Perez is kind of your diet Alex Smith.
Is it interesting that, and it wasn't lost on me either, if it's Perez or Scott, Brian Scott that start having the battle of the USFL quarterbacks there with Kyle Sloter. I mean, it seems like a weird kismet, whatever. I mean, certainly not planned that way that XFL is sitting there, hey, we're going to do this, but we have Kyle Sloter there presumably, and then Scott or Perez. It seems it's weird, right?
I mean, they might have planned it that way, but the XFL is low-key showed a little bit of shade. I think we've talked about it in groups towards USFL guys. While I believe both leagues think they are superior to each one, I know everyone makes a big deal of the XFL taking almost 60, well, I think it would be 61 players now who have been in the USFL or were drafted by USFL teams. And a lot of these XFL fanboys, analytical types, have been like, oh, the USFL is so trash. Look, we got all their good players. And I'm like, that might be a little bit of a bad, verbiage to use, because if this league is so trash, why did you take 61 of their guys? Now, I 100% believe the XFL is superior in the fact that their schedule allows for an NFL-esque player to prepare the post draft when teams are just like, okay, we have 88 rosters, we'll just sign this, or 88 guys on my 90-man roster. Let's sign this guy. Okay, let's bring in this dude for a mini camp with the rookies, see how that goes. If you're an NFL level player, you will go to the NFL, whether you're playing in FCF, arena, whatever it is. And now there's just more options for you.
I think it was. I think I don't know. I would love to know what the thought process was with the USFL brass. We're touting all these guys coming in back in July, and it looks so great. Obviously, Gavante Turbin, Pro Bowl, that is the standout in that, right? And that it's good for FCF as well, being able to have his lineage there. But it looked really good. We have 55 or whatever guys signed, and then to see one. But like you said, you do view as though the XFL has a stronger timeline there for guys going directly back in and actually not just hitting the camp, but actually sticking.
Yes, if everything was the same in a perfect world between the both leagues, and I was a guy who was on the cusp, and I could go to an XFL team and garner 80% of the snaps at my position versus a USFL team, then I would go to the XFL, because if I had that nagging hamstring, and even if I put up 700 rushing yards, I'm a running back or something like that, now I have 3 weeks after the XFL season to go to the OTAs, the mini camps, probably even longer, honestly, to recover. And now they're getting the best version of myself. Kyle Slaughter played hurt all year. While I didn't think that he was going to make the Jaguars, because I felt like they were pretty keen on the EJ Perry as their reserve guy, and plus he's probably cheaper because he was a rookie on the practice squad, where Slaughter probably brings in about 300 compared to Perry's 200K. It's still we all know Slaughter was hurt, and we definitely saw a fall off with his play.
In terms of final question for scheduling, and then I want to get to the roster breakdown here. Having because I'll get Andrew Murray's thoughts on this as well. But the networks, were you surprised to see so many cable networks not only 7 games? ABC rely mostly on FX, ESPN 1 and 2.
I mean, anytime you're putting games on ESPN, no matter what they are going to generate traffic. FX, I have to see how they do streaming and all that stuff. But a guy like me who travels so much, I rely a little bit more on streaming to watch anything. So I do think the FX thing, I'm curious to see what the ratings do come out for whatever week it is. Like if they're obviously playing 4 games, it wouldn't surprise me if there was like a 50% drop off, not because of the quality of play or the teams, but because of it being on FX. And maybe not everyone has that package. Maybe people are just, oh, okay, casual viewers. Oh, I'm just scrolling through. Well, I don't want to watch Yellowstone. What's on ESPN? Oh, okay, the Guardians and Roughnecks. That's cool.
I think it's good too, and we mentioned in the stream today, but all the games available on ESPN Plus too. I think is a selling point. If you're someone that likes to watch stuff on your phone, or like I can pull it up on my TV or whatever, it gives you that other option too. Where USFL, like, okay, I got to get Peacock and get the premium, or I got to get episode like ESPN Plus. I think it's $6.99 a month, and if you think you could get all 43 XFL games, that's really not. I don't think that's too bad. $20 or whatever to get all of that. Any other thoughts on that? And then we'll get to the Battlehawks roster.
No, and now that you tell me that I can watch all the games on ESPN Plus, I don't think it matters as much regarding the FX situation. But I think in time the ratings will dictate my opinion personally.
So what have you've had a chance to, speak with Coach, and you've gone to obviously covering the events and everything there in St. Louis. We're getting ready. Training camp here. Players reporting this week. Practice is starting on the 14th. They're doing like a week of medicals and, contracts and reading, the playbooks or whatever, all that kind of paperwork. Overall thoughts just before we deep dive, like A, B, C, D, how would you grade kind of the job Coach Becht has done?
Well, I think they're all A's until the end of the season, right? Because I don't know what any of these guys are going to do, because they all are capable athletes and comparable to everyone else on the team, minus the Orlando Guardians, who I'm pretty sure I'll be playing quarterback for them at some point this year, which is awesome, right? So, when I did talk to Coach Becht, It was on November 1st, so it was a little bit of a very reserved on the type of players he's going to get. There are some guys that clearly have a lot of ties to him and Bowler, Dave Bowler, DPP, when they were with the AAF together. There are some guys that he went straight to the NFL like AJ McCarron, which I believe Mike Mitchell has made it very clear that McCarron was a Beck guy. I'm always of note that I want known commodities when I'm doing these alt leagues. I think AJ McCarron was a perfect pick because we know who he is, and he might not be great, but he's something to build off of. So I have no problem bringing in the Ryan Willis, who to an extent is a known commodity in the alt league world. But you also go down to a guy like Austin Prohl. Granted, did his dad help him get a job? A little bit, yeah, because he's obviously the wide receiver coach. But you have plenty of guys who do have experience in alt league and also have experience working in these NFL camps. As you can see, if you're viewing this and not listening, I have put even the salaries for a lot of these players, showing that these people have been around NFL environments and have earned NFL paychecks. Which, if you're air quote player number 54 going against another player, another roster, a lot of these guys might not even have touched an NFL training camp. So that experience that you got getting knocked around by by the ones and twos of an NFL team helps you out so much more. And being around, like Letty Brown was with the Chargers, right? Are you not telling me that Letty Brown didn't learn something from Austin Eckler? I think a lot of that goes a long way.
I just looking on here, is AJ McCarron, is he the highest grossing player of any of the XFL teams right now with 15 million?
That's what I think. I've done, I think Martavis Bryant and Josh Gordon might.
Oh, Josh Gordon. Yeah.
But the thing is I don't remember if Josh Gordon actually signed that big money contract because he was a supplemental pick. So he probably got a $4 million deal when he was drafted. Martavis Bryant, third round pick. And, the 15 million is definitely the most for the quarterbacks. I think the quarterbacks total about 20 million in this league, with McCarron accounting for about 75% of it.
You were talking, like you said, when you talked with Beck before, a little more reserved. Now that you're seeing the roster he's assembling, I mean, are you able to better formulate kind of what this is going to look like when we hit the field?
Yes and no. I mean, I'll have to dig deep into the offensive coordinators and whatnot. I mean, if this team goes 7-3, that wouldn't surprise me. I don't see them finishing below 500. Bruce Gradkowski is going to be a first-time offensive coordinator at the NFL level. So we'll see what type of offense he wants to run. Beck is a first-time head coach. I think this is his third year in coaching. You got Donnie Abrahams, been around IMG Academy. And then really the most experienced guy they have is at the linebacker position, which is Dave Steckel. He was a head coach. He was a head coach at Mizzou. So I was kind of hoping we might see a guy like Sean Witherspoon come into this, and maybe even Coney Ely and a couple other guys who are on the outskirts of their career who have Mizzou ties, even Sheldon Richardson, because he had him at Mizzou when he was a linebackers coach there, and working with the defense.
It's just interesting with Beck, like you said, first year coach coming in, not knowing what exactly that's looking for. I mean, he to me is the biggest blank page kind of like, what are we expecting of someone? Do you feel the same way?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, he definitely took a lot of guys with alt league experience. He took a couple guys that he had with the fleet. I think that number is like 6. And then in his supplemental draft, I think they took 5 or 6 USFL guys, guys who actually were playing in the USFL, not just happened to be on the team. And then you add in, out of the 14 guys he got, 10 of them had prior league. I actually played in a professional game, and I think 13 of them were in camp. 13 or 12 of the 14 with an NFL team at one point in their career. So he definitely went with the experience. And granted, experience may vary. However, I mean, it means something compared to someone who's all they did was go to minicamp for 3 days and hold a bag, which you've seen on some other teams.
In terms of wide receiver here battles, like you said, Austin Pearl probably got a leg in because of family connections that way. Do you see standouts there? Who do you see kind of rising to the top of that?
Marcel Atman, I think is going to be. He's a big guy. He's played in the NFL, played with the Raiders. I think he's got like 20 career receptions. Darius Shepard is kind of that wide receiver 6. I don't really see him being, and he's caught passes from Aaron Rodgers, and he spent some time on the Denver practice squad and actually had his spot taken by Victor Bolden. That's a guy. Not really surprised if those two guys kind of hit it off. You throw any of these slot guys in there, and then they have a guy at the tight end, Jalen Smith. He's kind of that tweener wide receiver to tight end. We might be able to see him kind of mold into a poor man's Travis Kelce. And Dante Addae, if I'm saying his name right, he's played in the NFL, he's played in the AAF, and he's played in the XFL. So the experience he can bring to these guys of teaching them about, kind of this is what the alt league is like, I think that would be extremely beneficial to a lot of these gentlemen. And then Jamarcus Bradley, he's on the Pittsburgh practice squad. I got him highlighted in red. If this guy's getting NFL looks, that means he's still got something in the tank. And you can't, if he's on these guys' short list, it's something to keep out for. It means he's got a lot of good things going for him. But if I saw Marcel Atman, Darius Shepard, Austin Pearl, and Dante Addae, being top 4 receivers on this team, which obviously doesn't mean they're top 4 receivers in the league, that would not surprise me at all.
And then in terms of, obviously AJ McCarron, being brought in, having that experience, Ryan Willis, people, knows. I mean, do you see much of a battle there? Do you see McCarron as more of that mentor role?
I see McCarron mentoring. I think he's comfortable with his life. He's an Alabama guy. So, he was doing the NIL thing before the NIL thing, most likely. He's been in the league for 8 years. He knows kind of who he is as far as what he wants in his career. If you're signing AJ McCarron based off his XFL play, that means I personally feel that means you're going to sign him no matter what. It's kind of like Garrett Gilbert. All Garrett Gilbert had to do was to maintain, and he would have been on NFL short list. Granted, he was the pseudo MVP of that league of the AAF. However, I think this is Willis's job to lose. And Nick Tiano was a guy, just kind of a camp body for the Texans and a CFL team. I forget which CFL team he was with.
Yeah, I missed that he was signed. He wasn't on my short list of guys I was paying attention to on the Battlehawks. But and then running backs here, we talked a lot on the XFL draft. Trying to draft heavy on that. At least starting out, offenses, starting slow in spring leagues with limited training camps and all that. Do you see standouts here, and how do you think they did?
I mean, I think Letty Brown could be the guy just because he's younger. He's a little bit more fresh. I think John Vogel highlighted him during the draft a little bit, but Brian Hill is a seasoned veteran. He's been in the league. I think with all these running backs, we're going to see a running back by committee until one of them shows that they can take over the position. I forget what the first overall pick was. I forgot that gentleman's name on the DC Defenders. That's about the only one that stands out to me as like, this is our day one guy, because he's still getting NFL workouts every week. It appears, multiple ones.
Yes, Abdul Abram Smith. There you go. I knew it was an A on there. I was like, don't put me on the spot here to remember that too, Greg. Abram Smith. Brian Hill was on the show, Alumni Academy guy, all that. Oh, before we go, because I knew we wanted to make sure and get your time in here with all that. Obviously, the team's still signing the NFL alumni guys right now. XFL had restructured their agreement with them. They're going to add the spots into training camp to be able to hold the guys in training camp. I have a feeling a lot of those guys are probably still going to get cut. Probably was going to happen anyway. Obviously, you'd rather be on a training camp and at least have someone looking at you. What are your thoughts on that? And I know you had some stuff you wanted to add before you go.
I mean, I with the Alumni Academy, I understand what they're doing. I like what they're doing. I hope all these guys who are going into this actually understand what this means. I feel like some of these guys that I've seen even on social media posting about this, they're a little bit overzealous. And while it's great to be excited about all this stuff, there's one gentleman who I've seen post a lot of stuff, and he played in the FCF. it's not that I don't want to use don't get your hopes up, but teeter your expectations. However, on the same side, you have to be in it to win it. So I totally get that.
No, it's a double-edged sword. I absolutely agree. But it's the same thing when we would see guys, USFL the same way, and the XFL, like, hey, this guy's in the draft pool, this guy's in the draft pool, this guy's in the draft pool. This guy, like, that's great, but there's only going to be, there's 1,500 guys or whatever. There's only going to be a couple hundred taken. Like, yes, you absolutely have to be, you got to be in the hand to win the hand. You got to have your cards there. But it is interesting that way. I just hope that, maybe next year they can figure out a more eloquent way to do this. But I think this was going to happen anyway. I just think XFL is having to bite the bullet and, hey, we got to pay these guys an extra 2 or 3 weeks here to come to training camp.
And I would love if the XFL and the USFL could, run some drug deal to where these alumni academy guys like teeter in and reverse it to the hub as well, if that's what it takes. I mean, there's plenty of guys out there that will find that are out of nowhere regarding their skill set that play football, obviously. Now, if one NFL alumni guy goes and becomes an all-pro or a pro bowler in the NFL, I mean, that kind of validates a lot of it. But at the same time, there could be a bill of goods being sold to some of these guys. And I think that might have been an issue with all the controversy a couple weeks ago. And I think both parties, the Academy and the XFL, did a good job in rectifying it. Because for all we know, a couple of these offensive linemen go to camp. They don't want to do it anymore. And then all of a sudden, an alumni guy who was your, right tackle 5 is now right tackle 3. And, the Battlehawks didn't want him, but, the defenders do now because they saw something in him or something like that.
Final thoughts before I let you go. I know you got to do some other stuff here. Anything on Battlehawks, the schedule, anything else while I have you today?
2 things on the roster. 2 guys to look out for are Vidal Alexander, a guard, and Jawan Bushell-Beatty. Both those guys played in the USFL last year. Alexander was out of football for like 4 seasons, and then came with was with the Oakland Raiders. That's how long ago it was, and then became a serviceable guard for the Kirby Wilson's Maulers. I do like their offensive line. I wouldn't, real preliminary on that left side. Let's go John Toth, Vidal Alexander, and Jawan Bushell-Beatty as starting on one of those sides. And then another guy is Christian Olmstead. He was with Ryan Willis in the Spring League. And, they obviously won a championship. I'd love to get in the defense. I honestly don't have time. If we kick over the special teams, in the supplemental draft, they were the only team to pick up another long snapper or specialist in general. Now, they did just hire Torrey Woodbury to be their special teams coordinator, so you might have a battle at long snapper. And no one cares about specialists until it's the last part of the game and they miss a season or something like that.
Interesting. Well, and with they've kind of neutered the extra points and stuff in the XFL. I never liked that. I don't know which is better, the USFL and you kick for one, or the XFL and all that stuff. But interesting there. Special teams is hard in spring leagues because it's such kind of a cluster anyway. I mean, we saw with the Panthers were running out of punter to kick field goals and stuff.
Yeah.
And, we run into issues there sometimes.
Yeah, they had the worst kicker in the league, and then they picked up another guy 4 weeks later who's kicking 60-yard field goals and winning Players of the Week.
Well, this is good, Pat. A lot of work. Is your article up or is going up on News Hub with the the following up the Battlehawks supplemental stuff, and then obviously Pat will be having his thoughts up, I'm sure, about scheduling and all that other stuff. Anything Battlehawks, Pat's going to be your guy this year. Really appreciate it, and I think it's good. A lot of you guys in focusing down on the teams so we can do stuff like this. So
yeah, my supplemental update is there. I'll do an Alumni Academy article at some point when I have time. Right now, obviously, the Alumni Academy hasn't officially been announced, but XFL Analyst has been pushing a lot of those guys out. He pushed out a couple more guys today, so I'm kind of waiting until an actual announcement comes. I think that would be fair and respectful to players who maybe got, hey, we're going to get you versus we got you. So I think that'd be fair because we all know the players read the article sometimes and they'll reach out and they'll correct us on certain things. I think that's a very fair thing as well.
Yeah, we don't want the CFL All-Star voting again. Where all the guys got, I don't want to laugh, but all the guys got nominated, and then it's like, oh yeah, that tabulation's wrong. Sorry. Well, Pat, running around, appreciate it as always, and we'll get you next time. And thanks so much.
Thank you.
A special thanks to both of my guests today, Andrew Murray for coming on, coming from work. As always, appreciate the professor's time, thoughts, and expertise. And then Pat Rifino coming on as well. Pat is just a wealth of knowledge. If you guys don't follow either Andy or Pat on Twitter, but I know Pat's always posting stats and tracking alternate league quarterbacks and their rankings and in the NFL season and how many backup quarterbacks have played every week this season and record numbers and all that stuff. Really appreciate that. And like I said, Max for coming on this morning as well with the live stream as I record this morning, but doing the XFL schedule breakdown analysis. Really appreciate that. Kind of above and beyond here. Everyone hopping in and helping me out with this. It is a one-man show, but I certainly can't do it without kind of your guys' support watching and listening, and then obviously all of the writers and other talented guests and smart people that we have on to kind of help fill out this content. I could not do it without everybody involved. Like and subscribe. Get the Brian Scott ball off my hands. He texts me like every other day. Have you given the ball away yet? So get this off my hands. Like and subscribe. Get ready. XFL 2023 schedule is here. We're getting close. Like 5 weeks. I have my tickets booked. We will be in Arlington for the kickoff game. I just booked my flights in the hotel. Dorothy will be there. Not quite sure what that show is going to look like yet. We'll be there for that. Look for coverage all weekend, the kickoff weekend in whatever form that looks like. I will be missing the first Sea Dragons game. The Thursday game. We'll still be in Mexico, heading to Mexico on vacation en route to the XFL championship game on that February 18th. So anyway, should be busy. Appreciate it. Lots of logistics today. Thank you guys for your support. But yeah, look forward to that. Like and subscribe. Going to have wall-to-wall coverage here heading into the XFL 2023 kickoff. Should be having XFL news here as well. And then I mentioned on our live stream today, if you are thirsty for CFL content, I know it's been really XFL focused lately, just a lot of stuff going on with that. CFL off season, they're kind of taking their break after the Grey Cup. Tons of Grey Cup stuff coming, tons of CFL, stuff coming next week. Should have lots and lots of good guests lined up. Not sure if it's all going to be one show, multiple shows, what we're going to do. I've mentioned before, Victor Cui is going to be making a reappearance here coming up. Had to reschedule that with his work stuff, but he'll be coming on. Lots of other CFL guests. I will share it online as soon as I have all that confirmed, but should be really good. Thanks as always, DeMar Hamlin, everybody with that. Thoughts and prayers. Thank you guys all so much again.